To hell with the date on your birth certificate. Let's talk about what we have in common across generations. Life, sex, and tech at any age. Welcome to Age Blind with Nancy A. Shenker.
Hey, boys and girls, and welcome to another episode of Age Blind, where the date on your birth certificate does not really matter. And we're focused on the things that bring us together as opposed to the things that divide us. And today's topic is a little heavier than some of our other summer topics. Our theme for May is help. And in this case, we are going to help you combat ageism. And ageism is not just being discriminating against old people. There is also something called youngism, which is assumptions that just because somebody is young, is in their teens or 20s, that they may not be capable of doing a particular job. And we're going to prove that wrong today in the next 30 or so minutes. So ageism is real. And trust me, nobody knows that better than I do. When I was in my 50s and going through a divorce, I contacted a recruiter about getting back into the corporate world. I had been a CMO at a major company, the company that produces Comic-Con. And I was told by the recruiter in no uncertain terms that I was unemployable in my 50s, that nobody was looking for a CMO, especially in the tech world, who was over the age of 45. And I am not alone in that. 60 to 64% of all workers 45 and older have seen or experienced some form of age discrimination at work. And as I said, youngism is also a reality. And there are a lot of young people who are having trouble getting taken seriously by their bosses, having trouble getting jobs because people assume that they don't get it because they're young. And obviously today we're out to disprove that because our guests today span about 4 decades in age, and we all have stuff in common, proving my point. The other really sad reality is that even though boomers control $8 trillion in disposable income, that's trillion with a T, only 6% of the people who work at ad agencies are over the age of 45. So companies are missing out on a huge opportunity to grow their bottom line because they're so busy targeting products and services to the next generation as opposed to looking at the people who have the money. And they're not mutually exclusive. Like, for example, I wear Free People clothes, but you'd never see a model my age in Free People ads or in the Free People catalog. But I probably have spent more on Free People than the entire 20-something population of Scottsdale all put together. So again, you can't look at age. You need to really look at behavior patterns, buying patterns, and commonality. So enough blah, blah, blah. Let's just go down the line, and each of our guests today will introduce themselves and, importantly, how they met me, because these episodes are always like random people I put together, but what they have in common at the hub of the spoke is me. So let's start with you, Matt, because I've known you the longest, actually, even though you're one of our younger guests. Go for it.
Wow, that's an honor. But yeah, Nancy and I met back in 2020 when I had first moved after finishing my master's degree, moved to Arizona for a role and knew no one. It was the peak of COVID. And we were both just by the pool and in this time of wanting community, connected on our love of travel and our love of, work and our passion for, just business and tech innovation in general. So we stayed close ever since. And I talked to Nancy probably just as much as I talk to anyone, really, between WhatsApp or any of our other conversations. We also have a website that we write together for travel called Leisure Living, which I think you'll talk about in an upcoming podcast. But yeah, and I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, and that was a great job, Matt, because, travel, obviously lying out in the sun was something we had in common.
Oh, yeah, missed
discovering
that.
new cocktail bars, technology. So yes, the list goes on and on and on. And, we're still friends to this day, even though Matt now lives in London and I'm still in Scottsdale. So Corbin, your turn.
Yeah. So Nancy and I met when we were both at an office at Industrious, and she was walking by one day and saw my comic books, some of them I have back here, and stopped by and said, "Hey, I like your comic books. I have comic books too." And we just started talking, and she asked me what I did. And I'm a videographer. So then we started talking about that. She needed one. And what excited me to work with Nancy initially, most out of anything, was actually that she wanted to get on a phone call. Everyone is always like, text me, email me, but she wanted to get on a phone call, which I really appreciate because I'm such a phone call person. It's so much easier just to pick up the phone than it is to text back and forth. So we got on the phone and we started talking and learned that we both have a very similar work ethic. I've had multiple occasions where we're talking late at night and then early again the next morning. And yeah, the rest is history. We've known each other for, I think, like 3 months now. So short, but it feels like a long time.
Yeah. And Corbin tells my story. So, sometimes I'll say, like, my April Fool's prank, which generated more volume and engagement than any other post I've put up. I told him what my vision was. And it was a little creepy because, he's younger than my youngest child. And there he is in my bedroom shooting me half naked. And the funniest thing was I said, this is like a Mrs. Robinson moment. And he said, who's that? So there's an old movie called The Graduate, a scene with Anne Bancroft and Dustin Hoffman. So I was like, Corbin, if you haven't seen this movie, you should see it and then you'll get it. But yes, we geek out on movies, on storytelling, on comic books, on props and videos. So many things. And between Corbin and his sidekick Tanner, who actually posts my social media, my engagement is skyrocketing. So proof positive that people of two very, very different generations can build a working relationship and a friendship and have it result in great things. So Janine, last but not least, and I'd like you to also talk a little bit about the conference you just came back from and what your Flipping the Script initiative is all about.
You bet. So I'm Janine Vandenberg. I speak and write about ageism and also leveraging the benefits of intergenerational teams and how companies can do that. I met Nancy when I was asked to write an article about ageism in dating apps, and she volunteered to be interviewed. And that was really fun. And so we discovered our shared passion for ending ageism and the fact we both have in common. We believe we shouldn't do it by hammering people over the head about, yo, you're being ageist, but more just talking about it. We are both East Coast women who have ended up on the West Coast and I think are probably still pretty stunned about it. And we also, I think, relevant to this conversation, I think we're puzzled, and I'm always puzzled, even though I do workshops about intergenerational teams, that anyone thinks that that is so unusual. Because I think for Nancy, for you and me, that's the way we live our lives, and we have friends of all ages, and it's the work we do. So I'm always confused when people are like, we must bring generations together. And I'm like, well, why aren't you doing that already? So the big theme at the conference, so I was just presenting on age inclusion in the workplace and other topics at the American Society on Aging conference in Florida last week. And the big theme really was the cuts that are being put into place. So there were the formal workshops that there was a big theme of intergenerational collaboration. How do we bring generations together? How do we talk about ageism? But the subtext really was what the cuts in DC are doing to the infrastructure that help people age in community. So that was interesting. Flip the script, your final question. So basically, what we are trying to do in the month of May is exactly what we're talking about today. How do we change those perceptions out there that older workers don't have value and show that actually, there are still some things that we can do? How do we change those big generational myths, right? That Gen Z is like this and boomers are like this and never the twain shall meet. And so we want to flip the script on that kind of narrative. And I think relevant to all of us, because in a way we're all entrepreneurs here, how do we change the narrative about who actually is an entrepreneur and that we don't just come in one shape and size and color and gender or age, and that entrepreneurship is a great path no matter what your age. So that's kind of what Flip the Script is about. And it's a month-long social and earned media campaign. So join in.
Yeah, absolutely. And you should all, not to be preachy, because that is one of the things that a lot of younger people object to in older people's behavior is when we get into lecture mode and say, well, when I was your age, blah, 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 blah. Like, who cares? Like, it's interesting if you're telling a funny story about, this is what I had to like. I was having this conversation with somebody this week, and I'm like, what did I do on the train in my hour and a half commute? I didn't have a smartphone. So I read books and did handcrafts because that was all, and talked to the people next to me because it was a very different time. Um, it's like, saying to someone, 10 years from now, what did you do before the era of AI? So, I do believe that one of the biggest challenges right now, as far as intergenerational collaboration, is this perpetuation that because somebody in a different age bracket, was born in a different decade, that you can't possibly have things in common. And just, between the four of us, we've shown that that's really not the case. Um, next one is for you, Matt and Corbin. You're both, I know, in your 20s, even though I'm age blind, I just happen to know that. Have there been times in your professional career where you feel like you have not been taken seriously or haven't gotten a job because of your age?
How much time do you have? Sorry, Corbin, I'm going to jump in on this one, but
Feel free.
absolutely. I finished with my master's degree when I was 22, and I had the years of experience, and people just didn't take it seriously. I would walk into an interview, even with all of the filters you can put on a Zoom interview, you could see people's faces and they would go, oh. No one ever explicitly broke the EEOC rule and asked, wait, remind me how old you are? But you could see it in their face. You could see it in how they asked their questions. And it was repeatedly, even in small settings within my current role, I can tell when people are upset that, oh, this person's, this much younger than I am, and they're getting to do this. And truly, in the spirit of age blind, that shouldn't make a difference. And I don't know why people have this sort of notion, but absolutely, I think that people it comes down to assumptions. I think of a lot of marginalized groups, that's the root cause of this, is these false assumptions. But I can say absolutely. But Corbin, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed, yeah, same situation, and I've noticed it both directions. So before I got into videography full time, I was doing events as well. I was in the AV world, so I was running the tech for lots of these big events. And in that world, it's very, very, you see a lot of this, and it goes both directions. So I was in a position where I got my technical level to a point where I was in charge of teams, and that often meant that I was in charge of people that were older than me. And so I saw it that direction too, like me trying to run a show and direct a show. And I would get pushback because of people that were older that had more experience, and they would not want to listen to me. And then in the same direction, though, I would also see it on the younger end, like pushing back against the older people. Like there was actually this term old heads, and that was like literally what they would call them. And it's like, oh, the old heads are being cranky today. And so it was going both directions, and it was causing, I mean, it still causes lots of problems. I still see it. But I mean, I've found ways to work around it. But I think it really is going both directions of like, some of the older people on these shows don't want to listen to some of the younger people because they think that they're inexperienced and don't have good ideas to bring to the table. And on the same spectrum, some of the younger people that I work with don't feel like they're taken seriously. And so age plays a really big factor in the live events world. And yeah, it's not solved. It really is not solved. But there's been improvement, at least on some of the shows that I've been on.
Yeah, and I think, you raise a really good point, Corbin, because, in a world where intergenerational collaboration is organic and it's really happening naturally and people genuinely like each other, you wouldn't hesitate to turn to an older producer and say, "Have you ever had this problem before and how did you solve it?" Like Matt and I, talk all the time. If he's facing, work issues or challenges, he will call me, and because he knows how many years I put in playing corporate games, and say, how should I handle this situation? And I will write the script as opposed to flipping the script. But, that has to happen organically. It can't be like, oh, look, kids, we brought in Nancy as the mommy of your work team. Or conversely, we need some young energy. So we brought in the social media dude who's going to school us all on how to do this. Like it's got to really happen organically without a quota system. And, older people, I'm doing a presentation in a couple of weeks called AI for OGs. If older people want to remain engaged and included in the workforce, they need to upskill. Jeannie has heard this story. I was speaking at an event, and I was talking about next generation technology. And one of the women in the group, and it was all women over 45, started telling some horror story of how her bank account was hacked and how you should never give away personal information to anybody. And I'm sitting there going, "Oi, I'm just so glad that there are not young people in this room, because it is reinforcing the stereotype." And then the whole room chimed in, and everybody started telling stories about grandmother fraud and, cybersecurity, and how they don't want to put any personal information on the internet. And I felt like I was back in, the 1990s. Like, it was just weird. The train has left the station. We just need to jump on it if we want to remain employed. Because it doesn't matter whether you like AI or you don't like AI, it's here to stay. So you can either go live in the mountains somewhere and retire, or if you want to stay employed, learn what you need to learn to stay relevant. So Janine, from your perspective, what else can older people do to remain relevant?
So I actually think it's what all of us need to do to remain relevant. Both Resume Builder and LinkedIn, when they released their most recent surveys about what skills you need, AI topped. So you've got this whole set of very technical skills around AI and that kind of thing, documentation, data analysis. Then you also have all the soft skills, right? Communication and that kind of thing. So it seems to me that it's incumbent on all of us to certainly not only learn AI, but become proficient in it, and to keep up with the future of work generally. And my big takeaway is that the future of work is intergenerational. I mean, one, workplaces are not going to be able to fill their talent pipelines if they just look for younger people, because we know younger people aren't having as many children. And that means that we've got this we're moving kind of from a pyramid shaped society to more of a barrel shaped society. So we've got to have people across the age span. And so to me, a really core skill is we've got to be having conversations like the one that you're hosting today and figuring out, how do we play well together? How do we reject the stupid media narrative, right? That generations are, pitted against each other. I mean, one of my least favorite headlines is when people say, well, millennials can't buy houses because boomers own them. And I'm like, well, are boomers supposed to go out on the street? Like, what exactly does that mean? And why don't we look instead at who is benefiting from not producing more housing, right? I mean, let's look at root causes more and that kind of thing. And I think we all need to learn how to do that. I also think, and I just want to kind of nicely challenge one of the things that I think you said earlier about this happens organically. I think some of it does happen organically, and certainly you're demonstrating it, Nancy, in your story. And some of it we can encourage. So one of the things when I'm talking to employers, I'm like, okay, you're staffing up a new project. Are you just looking at the usual suspects? Or are you kind of looking around at who else might be a great fit here? Who's the next Matt Caldwell that you want to bring in because he can really bring your company to the next level, right? So I think that we can't just wait for it to happen. We've got to be pretty deliberate. Things that are really effective are fielding intergenerational teams on new initiatives and new projects. Things that are really effective are reciprocal mentoring. So kind of what Nancy, you've talked about with both Corbin and Matt. But we can make those happen. We don't have to just wait for them to happen to have the right people in the room, like happen to be right here. If the right people aren't in the room, we can kind of nudge them to play well together. So that's my story I'm sticking to.
No, and that's a great point. And I was just going to say, Janine, I will not be taking the $5,000 to have another baby. And even if they upped it to 10, I wouldn't take that either. That was one of the things that has been thrown out as a solution.
That's another root cause thing, right? Could we look at how unaffordable childcare is and think of, it's not $5,000 is going to buy you 2 months of childcare. What on earth is that going to do, right? So I could go on longer on that. I'm going to, but
no. Yeah, I think the other thing that we can all do. And then I would love to hear, Matt and Corbin, your perspectives. One of the things that I've started doing lately, unapologetically, is when I see something, I say something. When I feel somebody is being ageist, or if I feel like they're a resistor to technology, or they say something disparaging about Gen Z, or I just got a pitch to write an article, and the headline was something like Gen Z does blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not writing that story, because we need to be looking at psychographics and behavioral indicators and not just dates on birth certificates. And there are a lot of people who've made a lot of money by polarizing the generations as opposed to looking at behaviors. That said, people over 50 do need to check their behavior, myself included, that if I make sweeping statements about younger people or call them, I mean, I know snowflakes who are 70 and I know snowflakes who are 20. Snowflakes are snowflakes. It doesn't really matter what the date is on your birth certificate. And as Corbin just pointed out, he and I have an amazing phone relationship, but if I need to give him direction on something, that's still the most efficient way to do it. So to make a sweeping statement like Gen Z doesn't like to speak on the phone, like says
Right.
who? It's not like
And I'm a
Gen Z doesn't
boomer
like
who
to speak.
doesn't like to speak on the phone. Like, would you just please text me or put it in Slack? But
I know. I'm just
don't
over
interrupt
that. Yes.
me of it, Nancy, about me. So yeah.
We should always ask preferred method of
A great
PMOC,
question,
preferred
I think,
method of
from us,
communication.
when people are making those kind of remarks, and it kind of stops people in their tracks, is, why do you believe that? And then you just stop and you just look at them, whether it's an assumption about anyone of any generation or any age. So if someone says to you that, oh, you don't have enough experience, why do you believe that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Try it and let me know what happens. It's my favorite
Yeah.
question to ask people.
No, I love it. And because the assumptions piece is so key with any underserved, marginalized community. It kind of comes back to that.
Yeah.
Matt, put this on you. Any other suggestions from your own experience of what we can do to combat ageism and really foster intergenerational collaboration?
I think it's like, worry about yourself and your relationships. I think outside you might have people go, oh wait, is that this person's mom, daughter, son, father, whatever. And I think in reality, if there's someone that thinks that or makes a comment of, oh, like, what are you? Well, we're friends. That's probably not going to happen. I hope that doesn't happen. But if they see it more and more of these intergenerational friendships and relationships happening and go, wait, that's so amazing that these two have found things in common and now they're getting to share these great experiences, whatever those experiences are, together and not on their own. I think that will organically, hopefully, start that change more. And I think that's like the biggest thing that I have seen is at first it might, like you said earlier, friends are 4 generations, 4 decades different. You let that go. And I would encourage people to, if you really enjoy spending time with someone and you have this shared interest, whatever that is, go for it, enjoy it. And don't be afraid to, be bold about how you met in your story. Because I think you'll find more people will be inspired by it and excited by it and even think, oh, okay, this is great, than the alternative.
Yeah. Can I totally agree here? So one of the things I do at the beginning of my workshops, and I actually posted this on LinkedIn today, and it's one of the questions you asked, and I pair people up. You've got 3 minutes to come up, and this, people who don't know each other, come up with 3 things you have in common. And what is amazing to me is every time I've done that, no one's ever said, oh, my age or my generation. People have said, like, really, we like comic books, or we both happen to like wine from this particular region in Burgundy, or people come up with all kind of things in only 3 minutes, right? That have nothing to do. So Nancy, to your point earlier, it is about psychographics. It's about values. It's about shared interest and that kind of thing. And if we can focus on that, and not follow the media headlines that pits generations against each other. That's just dumb.
Although the Bob Belichick stories are pretty entertaining.
I'm not going to say a thing. Um,
Corbin, what
Yeah.
do you have to weigh in on this?
Yeah, so I think the way that I look at it is kind of the way that I look at any form of conflict that kind of comes out, and it just comes from a core belief that I've learned through some of my mentors over the years. And what it kind of comes back to. So like my company, I'm all about story. I always want to know the story. It's something Nancy and I talk about all the time. And so something that's always in my brain is every day I enter a world where there's people around me that have a story. Everybody on the highway around me, like I don't know any of these people that I drive next to every single day, but every single one of those people is a unique individual that has a unique story and a unique experience. So tying this back into the age thing, like from a business perspective, like all four of you, well, three of you, there's four of us all together, all three of you have unique stories and unique skill sets that you have. So looking at it through that lens of like, what can I learn from Janine? What can I learn from Nancy? What can I learn from Nat? Like how can I actually learn something from these people? And not only like
Love
what can I
that.
learn from you skill wise, like what can I learn about your story? Because I think that the best way that we learn is story. Like stories have been the thing that is constant through all of the generations. Is we tell stories and that's how we learn. That's every single book that I read is basically people just telling their stories about life. And I think that's one of the best ways to learn. So in this idea of how do you remove age from the equation, it's just like what's unique about this person? Like I don't care what age you are. I care that you have a unique experience and a unique perspective of the world. And I think that we can find a lot of unity between us, between those things. And like me learning some things from you, you learning some things from me, and like just sharing those experiences. And I think looking at it through that perspective helps me to remove the age barrier because I mean, most of my friends are like not in their 20s. Like a lot of my friends are like, Nancy is one of my friends. Like Nancy's 69. I hope I'm allowed to say that. I'm sorry. I know we did a
Yes,
video publicly, so I think it's
absolutely.
okay.
No, no,
And like most of my friends are
I'm very
older.
proud of it.
Yeah.
And when people say to me, "You don't look 69," I'm like, what is that? Like, who has decided that there is a specific look for 69-year-old
Yeah.
women? Like,
Mhm.
maybe I look 69 and everybody else looks weird. Like,
Mhm.
like how do you
Yeah.
know? Like, that's not like there isn't a guidebook somewhere that says this is what you're supposed to look like at 69.
Nancy, I just
But
want a clip of what Corbin just said for the Flip the Script campaign. So when you're doing the edits, whatever it is, what he said about storytelling and people's individual stories is exactly what the Flip the Script campaign is about. So Corbin, we haven't met before.
love
Thank
that.
you for
Love
that.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do think that it's also really important that we educate HR departments and hiring managers to like shake their heads like an etch a sketch when they're looking to bring somebody on. You know, I just came back from the restaurant and bar and restaurant show, and everybody's complaining about the labor shortage. And I say, well, have you looked at, retirees or, older employers as a possible labor pool? And most likely they haven't. And I think that a lot of newer managers, I'm not going to say younger managers, find it awkward to be supervising somebody who may be the same age as their grandmother. And I had that experience when I was in my early 30s where I needed a traffic coordinator and I wanted somebody who had done the job before, who was very calm under pressure. And I hired somebody who was probably twice my age. And um, I had to then re-educate my team that if they all wanted to go out and get wasted at happy hour and stay out until, 2 in the morning, that may not be something that she would necessarily want to do. So I became much more collaborative as a leader to say, all right, what would all of you find to be fun? The same way I did when I had, a mostly female department and I had one guy working for me, is making sure that everybody felt like they belonged, which is the big thing of the whole DEIB initiative. It's not just making sure you could check the box and say, oh, look, I have a boomer on my team, but it's what are you doing to make that person really feel warm and welcome? But thank you. This has been really, really terrific and provocative, which is one of my favorite words. And one of the intentions of Age Blind is to make you think and maybe not to change your mind. But if you disagree with anything you heard or you want to agree heartily, please feel free to comment. So, Matt, if people want to connect with you, how can they find you?
Yeah, search me on LinkedIn. And this is a topic that I'm very passionate about. So send me a message. I will have a in-person if you're in London or a virtual coffee chat with anyone. So yeah.
Corbin.
Yeah, you can find me on my website, just K27media, the letter K27media.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn, but I don't go on it very much. So you can find me on there, but I probably won't see your message. But the best way to find me is just go to my website, go to my contact page. You'll find my email on there and just reach out. And I'd love to chat.
And Janine, flip the script.
Yeah, so I am on LinkedIn a lot. Corbin, I actually sent you a connection request. Now I know you're not going to get it. Matt, I looked for Matt Caldwell and there are 100. So you're going to have to tell me or
I'll
reach
find
out
you.
to me on LinkedIn. But you could also go to my website, encoreroadmap.com, where we've just launched the landing page for Flip the Script. And Nancy's logo is on it because she's part of the campaign. So thank you.
I'm flipping away. And Janine is one of the world's leading advocates for flipping the script. I'm going to use that term as opposed to anti-ageism or H activism or whatever you want to call it. But, people have said to me, Janine, I don't know if I've ever told you this. They go, do you know Janine Vandenberg? So you're like the Mick Jagger of the
really
Lizzo. Pick your generation.
I'm almost
Of,
his age. Right? Yeah. So.
Of age policy, because the policy piece of it is huge because, we all wish that people did the right thing all the time, but sometimes they don't. And that's where policy comes in.
It's just dumb.
And you could find me and Age Blind. The Age Blind podcast is obviously, if you're listening to this, you found it somewhere, but all the episodes are also up on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you happen to get your content. And I launched a new brand in February. It's nancyaf.com. And the F stands for many things, including the one that you may think it stands for. And then you can find me on Instagram as nancyaf_, because believe it or not, the one without the underscore was taken. And that is my personal brand. My business brand is the OnSwitch, TheonSwitch. I still do occasionally take on marketing consulting projects and writing, but this is really my passion, giving people information and humor and facts that will hopefully change a little something in what they do every day. And in this case, it's becoming age blind. So thank you all. You've been terrific guests, and be age blind. Peace out.
Yes.